Good afternoon. I am Elizabeth Arnold Poe. Do please call me Eliza if we're to be friends. I am the mother of that bright genius, Edgar Allan Poe, who has touched and thrilled the hearts of millions throughout the years. I died when he was but 2, leaving he and his brother and his sister parentless in an often cruel world. I was born in London to an acting family. When I was a small girl, my mother and I came to the States, where she debuted in Boston. That spring, I too made my first attempt upon the stage at the ripe age of 9. I sang a delightful diversion known as the Market Lass, which is rumored to cure ills of the spleen. Though my dad, I must own, is but poor, his cot pennies comfort supply, the vine tendril curls round his door, and streams meander anigh. The vine tendril curls round his door, and streams meander anigh. Health reigns and rewards daily toil, I rise at the lark's early song, and meeting my swain at the stile, to market I trip it along. To market I trip it along. To market I trip it along. Thereafter, I performed quite regularly, 3 to 5 nights per week, 2 to 4 performances a night. Mother was a widow, and she remarried another actor in the troupe, and soon we traveled throughout that land you call New England. Within a year's time, we provided mirthful and often tragic distractions for audiences in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New York before traveling to Charleston, South Carolina. You see, ours was a life of mobility. Actors rarely had proper homes or houses. We lived in taverns and in boarding houses. We were often despised by the upper classes of society. They still paid their admissions to come see our entertainments. After performing some time in Charleston, we continued on to Richmond, but Mother died of that dreaded, terrible disease, the yellow fever. At the foot of yon mountain where Rosewater plays, the thirst of the peasant to slake, a damsel so lovely enlivened our days, and we called her the Lass of the Lake. A damsel so lovely enlivened our days, and we called her the Lass of the Lake. My mother was my best friend, you see. I was so very lonely after she died. She had been my constant teacher. She was so beautiful and so brilliant upon the stage, and she taught me the art of articulation, poise, timing, all of the aspects of theater, really. Under her careful tutelage, I had developed a repertoire of nearly 30 roles by my 11th birthday. We continued on to Philadelphia, my stepfather and I, where we were hired by the most beautiful, most ornate theater I'd ever seen. Philadelphia was the nation's capital at the time, you see, and we were hired by Mr. Thomas Wignell, who had been a favorite of President George Washington. Mr. Wignell saw great promise in me, and I saw this as a direct testimony to my mother's careful education and love and devotion to me. My stepfather moved on, and I found myself quite in a state of independence by the age of 12. My life became the theater, my family, the players. And over the next years, as my repertoire and figure took shape, I found myself plunging headfirst into the most natural of states, love. Drink to me only with thine eyes, and I will play Earnest that from the soul doth rise, doth ask a drink divine. But might I of Jove's nectar sup, I would not change for thine. I fell in love with a handsome young man named Charles Hopkins. He was so talented. We were married in Alexandria when I was but 15 years old. Soon he was managing our little troupe in Richmond, and the plaudits filled the reviews. We were so very happy. 'Twas on the 21st of June in charming summer weather, when Harry told his tender boon that we might live together. 'Twas on the 21st of June in charming summer weather, when Harry told his tender boon that we might live together. I first said yes, and then said no, but each answer parried. At length the 12-month proved it so. The day that we were married, oh sweetest day in all the year, the day that we were married, oh sweetest day in all the year, the day that we were married, the day that we were married, oh sweetest day in all the year, the day that we were married. We were so very happy for 3 years, but alas, as I have learned, fall and summer must always follow spring and winter. Forgive me, I am often still so distraught I confuse my seasons. Fall and winter must follow the spring and the summer. Charles caught that same terrible disease which had taken my mother so many years before, the yellow fever. And I wish I could forget the terror and the horror of him dying from it. But I was young, I was a widow, I was 18 years old, and I found myself much in the company in the following months with a young actor from Baltimore named David Poe, Jr. David was a handsome man, had a fine voice for poetry, and I was much dismayed to find myself falling in love. Just like love is yonder rose, heavenly fragrance round it throws, but tears its dewy leaves disclose, and in the midst of briars it blows. Just like love, just like love, just like love, just like love. David and I were wed in Richmond. We moved to Boston, where we had 2 beautiful little boys together, little William Henry, and then our little Edgar. But David was not happy. He lacked the advantages of a theatrical apprenticeship, such as I had had under my mother, and therefore he stammered, he stuttered, he forgot his lines often, and the reviewers in Boston took great pleasure in tormenting him. I remember Mr. Buckingham writing, "We came expecting little satisfaction in Mr. Poe, and we were not disappointed." Meanwhile, my reputation as a promising leading lady of the stage was growing, and I do believe that David chafed at that. He began drinking more heavily, sometimes too indisposed to perform. He deserted our family in New York City. I do not know where he went. We were left alone. Oh, where can fly my soul's true Aurora fled, thy love to me thou didst impart. Thy love soon won my virgin heart. But, dearest Henry, thou wast betrayed. Thy love with thy poor cottage maid. Soon I learned I was expecting my third child. Oh, with what a mixed range of emotions did I learn this news. I considered returning to Boston, but to return to a city where I'd had such success and had my best and most sympathetic friends, now abandoned by my husband, would have been too much to bear. I could not endure the mortification. So I returned to the South, and it was in the Virginia town of Norfolk that I gave birth to my little girl, my little Rosie. Not long after her birth, I was forced to return to the stage to provide for my children. They needed food, shelter, but I was so sick. I developed a terrible cough, and then I began to see the flecks of red, the blood, the telltale sign of consumption. As I lay dying in a boarding house in Richmond, my children surrounded by me, I was much surprised to find my little room frequented with the great ladies of that city, Mrs. Gallego, Mrs. Allen, Mrs. Mackenzie, these kind, wonderful women who so admired my performance upon the stage and were so terribly upset to learn of my illness. I knew my time was coming, and so I sent little William Henry to Baltimore to be with his grandparents, David's parents. They'd had no word of their son. Mrs. Mackenzie in Richmond, her family has a girls' boarding school. She's going to take in my Rosalie. She will have a good education. Little Edgar, my sweet little child, he'll be 3 soon. How he stares at me with those huge eyes. Mrs. Allen whispers to me she can have no children of her own. Her husband is a well-to-do merchant here in town, and she dotes on my little Eddie. He will be well loved with her. I'm only 24 years old, and I will be leaving behind 3 beautiful, talented children, a repertoire of nearly 300 roles, countless songs and dances, and the unfulfilled promise of a great theatrical career. With that, I would love to conclude with one of the songs that I was most famous for in my time, a song which many audiences requested. It's a popular song of the time called "Nobody Coming to Marry Me." Last night the dogs did bark, I went to the gate to see, when every lass had a spark, but nobody came to me. And it's, oh dear, what will become of me? Oh dear, what shall I do? Nobody coming to marry me, nobody coming to nobody coming to woo. coming to woo. Nobody coming to woo. And now I must die an old maid. Oh dear, how shocking the thought. And all my beauty must fade. But I'm sure it is not my fault. And it's, oh dear, what will become of me? Oh dear, what shall I do? Nobody coming to marry me. Nobody coming to woo. Nobody coming to woo. I want to thank you so much for letting me share my story with you today.